So we will continue reading Owen Barfield's The Silver Trumpet, and we're almost done. I have about 4 chapters to go, and we are on chapter 12. So early the next morning, with a little cook's letter to Miss Thompson in his pocket and a full day's wages in his purse, Prince Perio set out for Mountainy Castle. When he came to the town at the foot of the hill, he went into a shop just as it was being opened, for the payment swabbed and the shutters lifted down with a clatter, and bought himself a new lace collar and a new cocked hat. He would have liked to wear his suit of bright chainmail, but there were two reasons why he had not brought that with him. One was that it was rather too heavy to walk around the world in, and the other because he wanted to approach the castle not as a prince, but in disguise. For he wished to find out all about the people in the castle before he told them why he had come. He thought himself very lucky, therefore, when, on arriving at the castle gate, he saw a stable boy leaning idly against it. This stable boy was a good-natured, hobbledehoy young lout, all legs and wings, who yanked about the castle in a suit of corduroy reach-me-downs, with a straw hanging out one side of his mouth, and a melancholy whistle tootling out of the other. "Morning," he said to the prince. "Good morning to you," answered Prince pleasantly. Prince Perio. Very soon they fell talking, and Prince Perio began to ask the stable boy what was going on inside the castle. The little cook at the inn had already told him what had gone on while he was still in the castle, but he didn't seem to know much about what had happened since. He had not been at the castle since Princess Lily was born, so he said, and that was nearly 20 years ago. "Yes," said the stable boy gloomily, "things is going from bad to worse inside. Old Gamboy, she's got 'em all into the coop, like a lot of chicks, and she's sitting on the lid, and there she'll stay, I reckon, as long as she's on top of dirt." He shook his head sadly from side to side, and the straw hanging from his mouth wagged to and fro, as solemnly as the pendulum of a grandfather's clock. Then out of the other side of his mouth he went on talking. "Them amalgamated princesses," he said indignantly, and after a pause, "Anyone think the castle belonged to them? His poor old Majesty, stuck in his study from morning till night, not knowing what's going on, and not daring to come out and see for himself. They do say, as if he so much as shows his face at the door, old Gamboy's up and fussing all over them, because before you can say sneeze. Well, dear, what is it, my dear? Me dear, troubling that poor old head of yours, are you? Better leave it all to me, darling. Much better leave it all to me. Yes, Lily's quite well, my dear. I'm looking after her. Oh, Lord, haven't I heard all about it from the parlor's maid? Haven't I heard it more than one times?" Prince Perio's heart leaped when he heard the stable boy say Lily, but he said nothing, for he wanted the lad to go on. "They do say," he continued at last in a hoarse whisper, leaning forward to the prince's ear, as he just sits in his study all day, just staring and staring at nothing. He don't seem to know quite where he is, poor gentleman. Perhaps it's a good thing he don't. I tell you, when I heard 10 years ago that he was married to her, he could have knocked me down with a feather, just like that. He could knock me down with a feather. Nobody knows how it happened. I don't believe His Majesty knows himself. They say he just kind of woke up one morning and found it all happened, starting calling her queen. I don't wonder neither, seeing as she'd been bossing him about enough for 50 queens ever since her sister died. But the queer thing is, mister, they say as he don't always seem to know the rights who she is. He mixes up the old and the new in his poor old head. Calls her Violet, you know. By this time, the prince and the stable boy, without knowing what they were doing, had entered the castle grounds. The stable boy went on. I tell you don't like it at all. I don't like it at all. Uh, you should have heard her talking down in the marketplace when the famine was on. I wasn't but a little nip. I wasn't but a little nipper then. But my, she said some nasty things. My father believed them all. Too. Marched up to the castle, he did, the night the queen died. But Prince Pirio had heard all this from the little cook at the inn, so he interrupted. What are the amalgamated princesses? He asked. Ah, said the stable boy. Well, what are they? She knows, said the stable boy, darkly squinting. Doesn't anybody else know? Not properly, they don't. But I'll tell you, mister, I know one thing, and that's not two. He leaned forward and whispered again. They pays her subscriptions. And she spends them all on herself and her own funarious schemes. Embezzles them, suggested the prince. That's it, mister. The first thing she did with her blooming subscriptions, as she didn't properly belong to her, she was to purchase that great black book of hers, and she spent the rest of them experimenting with magics in that book. I tell you, it fair gives you the creeps to walk underneath her window at night and hear the old lady up there mumbling and muttering to herself or the devil. It's pretty much the same thing, I reckon. And them amalgamated princesses, they still goes on paying their subscriptions. Oh yes, they still go on paying up through the nose. They seem to like it. There's nothing so queer as folk, I reckon. Very. They were talking so hard that they never noticed that they had come right up to the castle wall and were standing underneath Gamboy's window. But Aunt Gamboy up in her room, bending her head low over the squiggled pages of Excerpta, had heard their footsteps. She perked up her head, and her dark eyes gleamed suddenly with a baleful light. She crept to the window. She could see them. She could hear every word they said. She heard Prince Pirio ask the stable boy where Princess Lily was and what she was doing. The boy pointed to a building a little way outside the castle grounds. It was a high stalk-like tower with a little door at the bottom of it, and at the very top a few narrow slits of windows. The rest was blank, staring stone. She's in there, he said, and then Gamboy heard him tell the prince what follows. When the Princess Lily had at last recovered from her long illness, she was so wasted by fever and so weakened by pain that her own father could scarcely recognize her. Nor was she indeed the same girl. Ever since the day Anne Gamboy had had tea with her, she had been peak-faced, irritable, and headachy. A silence had fallen on her. She would never open her mouth of her own accord, and if she was asked a question, she would answer yes or no, and say no more. If anybody asked her to do anything, to play at ball or go a walk, she would only look peevish and avoid complying. She no longer read the wise and beautiful books on her father's shelves, nor did she dance any more, as she had danced to him in the old days for joy, but sat about in drooping attitudes with her white hands hanging listlessly in her lap, thinking. She was a burden to all who came near her, and all were astonished at the change. Her own servants, who had delighted to serve the gay young thing she once was, now avoided her whenever possible, and pouted back sour and sullen looks at her garrulous upbraidings. But there was one thing which nobody noticed. Nobody, that is, except the old Lord Telewich, and he saw most things that went on under his nose. And that was that Princess Lily had grown timid. She, who had never trembled until she saw the toad, was now ready to be scared by her own shadow, terrified by the darkness, and startled out of her skin by the banging of a door 2 rooms away. Often, just before she went to bed, she would run to Gamboy and cling on to her hand. "Auntie," she would say, "will you promise me that no toads will get into my room tonight?" "They won't, will they?" And then Gamboy would turn her head and look down at Lily through her great round spectacles and say, oh, so kindly, I can't promise, my darling. It's very unlikely. It's never happened before, and I sincerely hope it never will. But they may, of course. Anything may happen, you know. You mustn't be frightened. There's a good girl." Then Princess Lily would answer obediently, for she was still obedient to her aunt. "No, Auntie, I only thought I'd just like to ask you." And then she would go off to bed, trembling with fear, and lie awake half the night with her eyes wide open, staring into the darkness. All the time, as the days went by, she came more and more to lean on her aunt and go to her for comfort and to believe every word she said. So that if Gamboy had once told her firmly what was no more than the truth, that no toad could possibly get into her room as long as she kept the windows shut, she would have slept quite happily every night, and very soon she would have been peaked face and white no more, but as healthy as it is possible for anyone to be who sleeps with windows shut. But Aunt Gamboy never told her this. As for her father, she scarcely ever saw him now, for he too had come to lean all his strength on his new queen. He believed himself to be happy, because he no longer thought much about anything, not even about Violet. But he was not really happy. So Queen Gamboy gradually gathered all the affairs of state into her own hands, and at last even began to attend the meetings of the is it privy or privy?
Privy, I think.
Privy council in her husband's place, while he sat mooning in his study. As a matter of fact, she used to put slumber syrups in his coffee. Ever since their marriage, she had insisted on making it for him with her own hands. And ever since their marriage, the king had grown sleepier and sleepier. So that poor pale little Lily scarcely ever saw her father nowadays. Or if she did see him, he seemed only half to know her, and would make some foolish remark or other about the weather or the political situation. He would never tell her that she was safe from toads. He didn't even know she was frightened of them. So at last, at the Queen's suggestion, she had had the high stock-like tower built for her, and even there she did not feel safe from toads. And there she sat all day, every day, with her hands in her lap, staring, books all around her, and she never read one of them. Pictures, and she never looked at them. She did not know the history of her own country, and she might have learned the history of the world. Indeed, so far from knowing its history, she did not even know how it was made or what it was made of. Every spring, the wildflowers burst into a sea of blossom that foamed up against the very foot of her tower. Honeysuckle, loosestrife, lady's mock, daffodils, Goldilocks, orchises, palm, and the drooping star of Bethlehem, and she never troubled to learn their names. The birds perched on her high little windowsill and said jug jug or deedle deedle, but she could not tell one from the other. And at night the constellations, Orion and the Great Bear, looked in, but she did not know them apart. She did not even know the difference between a star and a planet. What is the good of knowledge, she said, and began to forget all that her father had taught her. Nothing seemed to her to be worth doing, for nothing she did brought her any pleasure. Nor could she think of anything for a long time except toads. At night she dreamed of them. In his own words, the stable boy explained all this to Prince Pirio. He did not know all that I told you. What he did know, he had only heard from the castle servants. But he knew enough to make the prince understand. For months, nay, for years now, the castle, he said, had been like a painted castle. There was a spell on it. The king silent in his study all day, and the princess shut up in her tower. Even the servants went about their work with hushed voices and glum faces. A silence like death seemed to have come upon them all. One person only seemed alive. One person moved to and fro with a purpose, Queen Gamboy. She too was silent, but not with the silence of death. She was silent rather as ants and spiders are silent, and it was with her swift hurrying that she glided to and fro. Now when the stable boy had finished his story, he nodded to the prince and loitered away to the stables. But the prince stood still, pondering deeply how he might win Princess Lily to be his queen. For nothing that the stable boy had said had changed his love for her. He only longed more than ever to marry her and to give back to her the joy in life. Somebody else stood still too. Up in her window, a little way above his head, Queen Gamboy was standing still, thinking. And as she thought, she frowned. She had overheard every word of the talk between the prince and the stable boy. What is more, she had heard the trembly sound in Pirio's voice when he asked after the Princess Lily. And she was no fool, wasn't Queen Gamboy. Aha, said she to herself. A poor chance for your schemes, Gamboy, my dear, if this young fellow is to come and set us all by the ears because he happens to have seen a picture of my niece. And just when we're all getting so comfortably too, we're getting on so comfortably too. I couldn't stir up those fool citizens down there in the town to rebel, even when they were starving. So it's plain that they must have some king, or rather over them. But if there is to be another king in the monotony after King Courtesy, it shall be my son, mine, Queen Gamboy's. And she scowled fiercely at the looking-glass, partly because she hadn't even got a son yet. That young man wants taking down a peg or two, I fancy, she muttered, and she peeped out of the window to see if he was still there. Yes, there he was, standing underneath the window, dreaming like a loon. Gamboy tiptoed across her room to the table and picked up Excerpta. Softly, with a great black volume under her arm, softly she crept back across the carpet to the window. He was still there. Now she opened the book at a page she knew well enough and began softly to murmur her spell. She whispered it, lest he should hear and start away before it had time to work. And as she whispered it, she moved her corky arms to and fro, engraving wicked rhombs and pentacles on the empty air. Now I cannot tell you the exact words she uttered. If I did, the same thing might happen to you that happened to Prince Perio. Not exactly the same thing, of course, unless the story is being read aloud to you, and the person who's reading it happened by chance to make the exact patterns in the air which Gamboy made. But even if all this could not be so, even if you're reading the book to yourself, quite enough might happen. Um, uh, quite enough might happen to make you very, very uncomfortable. And Gamboy had been studying that book for years now, you see, and her magic had grown very much stronger since the last time she used it, which was when she made her own and Princess Lily's teeth chatter up in the royal nursery 10 years ago. These then were something like the words she whispered, but not the exact words. No dimber, dambler, angler, dancer, prig of cackler, prig of prancer, no swigman, swaddler, clapper, dudgeon, kedgloak, curdle, or curmudgeon, no whip jack, palliard, patrico, no jarkman, be he high or low, no dummer or rappery, hopson, jopson, jigamery, nippot, niminidoxy, duffer, nor any other will I suffer to prevent me from transmogrifying that young man. No sooner had she finished than the dreaming prince came to himself with a jerk. He felt sick, wondered where he was, and in the twinkling of an eye saw his stomach shooting out in front of him, and felt his eyes bulging from his head. And now Gamboy craned her scraggy neck over the window sill, and gave a long sorcery chuckle to see on to see on the ground beneath her, just on the spot where Prince Perio had been standing a moment before, a great gray-green lolloping toad. Wow, that's scary. Well, um, one thing that stood out for me is it's interesting that her spell, just from the point of view of philology or in linguistics, it's like full of strange repetitions of consonants. I don't know what else, but it just makes me think of the kind of mesmerizing speeches that I heard that Hitler gave, back in the day. That seemed to be, I mean, when I actually watched a documentary that linguists say that his speeches were very particular in that way. They were full of repetitions, uh, like he was saying almost the same thing in different ways. And there were certain like accents and certain things that he kind of trying to impress on you as he spoke. And so it's just like, I mean, I'm just still becoming more and more aware of how much of this spell binding thing going on around us with word. I mean, with people don't seem to make much of words nowadays. But still, that just they can't help being under that power. How they're put together and how they're woven and that type of thing. So,
Yeah, that is really interesting. Like for me, listening to the music of those words, they're very ugly. Like the sounds are ugly, you know, Pagliard, Patrico, Darkman. I mean, they're not soft sounds. And when I was in Spain, I was just listening to like the melody of the language, and it
mhm.
was so beautiful. Like it has so much style. And I remember a woman on the train, she was just like, the way she was speaking, she was like a walking work of art. Like her very speech was musical, and she was so animated. And I just remember watching her and thinking she just had this like beauty of expression, very ordinary event talking on a train, but Whereas here, the music is just so, it's very ugly and it's just like it just kind of jerks and you feel
Yeah,
kind of awkward listening to it.
yeah. Yeah, interesting. In the Silmarillion, in the beginning, in the introduction, when this evil guy, the Melkor, the devil figure, he kind of uh, fell off the music, the great music that God the Ilúvatar was making, and the way he fell off from that grace, basically, is he started elevating his voice, like making himself sound louder and louder than everybody else. But it says that at the end, his voice sounded like braying. He thought it was music. It was like the height of musical elegance. But to everybody else, it was clear that it was braying. It was just like, endlessly repeating the same words. That's pretty much close to the text, you know. And that's pretty much kind of defines what an evil spell sounds like, kind of braying, uh, you know. Anyway.
Right. It almost like kind of gets you in touch with like all the things in life that annoy you, you know, and when you were talking about Hitler using repetitive words too, I mean, he probably also used an amplifier for one of the first times in history. And so that's a really good description. But yeah, I think ugly language sometimes makes you feel, suddenly it makes you very aware of like just all the ugly parts of yourself. And musical language makes you feel like elevated and transcendent a little bit.
Yeah, there was a composer in the Soviet times, Prokofiev. I don't know if you guys are familiar. Prokofiev. He was so stunned by what modern technology does energetically to human beings in the Soviet Union that he wrote music to uh, to mirror the sounds of the street. And first time I heard it, I couldn't listen to it. I mean, of course, every time I open my window, like I hear those trucks, like heavy duty trucks, trud or would be the right word, rattling along, and then it would be the like siren. There would be like squeezing of the screeching of the brakes, and he was able to capture it in his pieces. But the feeling that you get energetically, so to say, is like something is being done to your brain almost like. And I mean, his intention was good. He was just wanted to show people what it is that they're losing when they are, that's the kind of surroundings that they're putting themselves in. That's, the environment that they're putting themselves in. So he was trying to basically say to people, there's, there's music in everything, whether you're aware of it or not. And some music is like this, and you hear it every day as you get out of your house and go to work, and then you go shopping, and then you go back. There's all sorts of music that fills you up, with whatever, transmogrifying spells, I guess.
Right. Yeah, it's like I don't want to keep talking. So I'll let someone else talk.
I was sitting on the porch of an old inn this week taking notes on a book, and the noise of the trucks. It's a beautiful old inn, the most beautiful in our county, but it is now kind of a crossroads for vehicles getting to the freeway. So all these trucks, all these sounds, all these screechings. I was so distraught because I wanted so much to enjoy this setting. So suddenly the notebook I had and the pen I had, I started looking at all the names of the trucks and writing them down almost as a game. In an hour, I came up with about 46 trucks in this small New England town. And I analyzed what were these things making this horrible noise. And it was every truck was related to homes, like, electricity or plumbing or landscaping or food trucks, or every truck had a purpose in our community for something someone needed and wanted. And that humanized the trucks. It didn't make the noise go away, but it made me feel more safe because all the noise was rattling me so much, made me feel that each person had a destination, a starting point and an end point, and money to be made and something to give. And it's like getting to the forensics of the sounds, down to the purpose of the sounds. I can't make anything of that except that it was an interesting exercise. And now I have a long list of trucks that go back in front of this inn. But it was compelling. I couldn't stop after a while. I wanted to go back to my work, but I kept looking at more trucks and more trucks and everyone. Like it could be a cable truck, it could be something that's a little more amorphous than food or flowers, but it was a lot of food and flowers, and real things being transported. And so I shared that with a friend. I said, this is why I'm not terrified by AI, because we're going to always need these things delivered. We're living in a physical world, even though we're frightened by it becoming more and more amorphous and given to us by others rather than our own lives, our own selves. But we're going to always be material bodies while we're on Earth with material goods. And no computer could deliver those flowers. Somebody had to take them
Yeah.
to a home and dig in the dirt. So that was the only positive I really came up with, is that we'd keep having workers. Everyone's so afraid of losing their work.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. A beautiful way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Humanizing, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And thinking of the just kind of like the music of things, and you mentioning flowers, I remember my husband and I have always been into, well, more recently been into like researching different alternative health things. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of I think it's called box flower
Box
therapy.
flower remedies. Yes, years ago,
Yeah.
I really was into that.
Never
This
heard
is
of
my
it.
20s.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like, different emotions have different frequencies in your body, and different flowers have different frequencies. And so the whole idea is to match a flower with the opposite frequency of whatever,
Wow.
emotion, like bad emotion that you're experiencing. I just thought that was kind of cool because, I mean, God's song is in nature. And
Mhm.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's what I hadn't thought of that in years. But yeah, I was really into it a million years ago, the
yeah.
remedies. That was living in New York City, feeling like I was totally out of touch with nature. I was getting books like that to almost like, I was on a barren planet trying to bring in earth and flowers and
Uh,
things.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I love that.
It's interesting. I just finished watching a documentary about a Russian lady who climbed the Everest mountain in Nepal, the highest one. And she's been mountaineering like her whole life. And but this particular climb was very, very difficult for her. And she had like two of her fingers kind of froze, and basically I had to amputate two of her fingers. But it was a 2 hour interview with her, and the interviewer asked her, "Would you do it again?" She kind of said, "Maybe not, but would you go to like high mountains again?" I said, "Yeah, I just," and I said, "Why?" And he asked her, "Why would you go?" And she said, "It's it's so far away from our civilization when you are up there,
Mm,
and it's the only place where I feel good."
wow.
It,
Mm.
I mean, after all, I mean, okay, she kind of said like this, put it like this, that yeah, of course I know the risks that I'm taking, but there are worse risks when I don't go. These are risks of having lived your life in a safe way in some way. Of course, there's a balance, uh, but not feeling that you're actually living. That's she said that's a worse, much much worse, much greater risk for me than that. And I was like, interesting. Okay.
That
But
is, yeah.
yeah, she was basically talking about that when you keep climbing those mountains, it's not that the summit that's your goal. The goal is to basically hear that music that opens up in just amazing, amazing, amazing ways, like flowers and vistas, and then heights, and then uh, fog, and it's just everything, everything.
Mm.
Yeah, I was also kind of struck by the way he describes Prince Courtesy's condition under the new queen.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so sad.
My goodness.
Yeah.
He calls her Violet's name, he calls her Violet, not knowing who's who. And it's just like,
Yeah. Well, she looks just like her, right? Basically.
yes.
So it
Mm,
that and he's getting foggier and foggier. But it's so the outsider sees the tragedy of his situation and can't save him, and his daughter now is just she seems frozen. The Wow. Well, Gambon is such a villain.
mm,
It's it's really sobering how one person can spread poison through you know, uh, a whole constellation of people and affect them in different ways, but nobody quite knows the source of the pain
mhm,
because they've lost touch with that. Sobering. Mm.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting to me is he's constantly playing on appearances. So like at first the prince pretends to not be a prince. He goes in disguise and because he just wants to check things out, like do reconnaissance before he identifies himself as a prince. So he's kind of veiling himself for good reasons. Whereas then there's the contrast of Gamboy who veils herself in a disguise, but it's her disguise is to be like you just said, where she's undermining people. She's stealing people's agency
Yeah.
without them knowing about it. And she's enhancing their fears.
Mm.
And they're not taking those risks that would get them up to those high mountains that Eugene just talked about. So it is interesting to see how there's all these hidden energies and things that appear one way and are really another. So
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
I like how he plays on those themes.
yeah,
Mm.
appearances. Yeah. Well, more about that is coming. I mean, he's I don't know if he knows what he's doing in this book because it was written in 1924, I believe. Uh, his
Yeah,
grandson told us.
I was just wondering that, Eugene, because I thought that's before we had all these various therapies and family systems and everything where you could, I mean, we've overdone it, but everything could be analyzed and it's pretty well looked at, in a chart of where each person is. But he's writing just from his intuition about people. And I, it would be interesting to know what brought him into doing the fairy tale. Why, maybe he could have done a more realistic novel or something. He's
Mhm.
such a smart human being. But yeah, I was thinking that same thing. I was dating it in my head and then thinking how he was coming out of, I mean, people had by then I think discovered Freud and Jung. Well, they were probably practicing. I'm not sure the dates, but he's in an almost pre-therapeutic age when he's writing this, which
Yeah,
is interesting.
that's interesting. Yeah, I think I've read somewhere that he had a relative who was just like that.
Gamboy?
Basically, actually, both. This one person combined two people in herself.
Mm.
Just Violet and Gamboy in one. I forgot who it was. It was either his aunt or his mother, something like that.
Wow, that's
So I read somewhere. I forgot where. So But that explains a lot.
That would explain a lot. I'd like to read more about that.
Yeah, I'll try to read up on that for next time.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go on. I need more light because we're having such a rain cloud here. Chapter 13. Poor Prince, as he felt the icy change come over him, he cried out and clutched by instinct at his most valuable possession, the picture of Princess Lily in his knapsack. But the cry simply turned into a dismal, reedy croak, and instead of the picture, his little legs closed on something else. And since he clutched hold of it with a part of him that had already been changed, it stayed in his grasp. If he had caught it a moment sooner and with his own human hands, he would have vanished with them when they vanished. If he had reached for it a moment later, it would already have been swallowed up like everything else. His knapsack, his boots, and his buttons and all in the change. But luckily for him, he got hold of it at exactly the right moment. And when he recovered himself enough to look about him, he perceived that he was holding between those little legs the letter of introduction to Miss Thompson, which had been given to him by the little cook at the inn. He would have wept if toads could weep, because it was the letter and not the picture which he had retained. He did not know that it was, he did not know that, he did not know that that was really the most fortunate thing that could have happened. At first, he squatted there on the ground in despair, not knowing what had happened to him, and hopeless of ever regaining his human shape. He nearly broke down. But he was a brave toad, not to be dismayed by anything that befell, however dreadful. So he set about thinking. Then he guessed that Queen Gamboy had something to do with the matter. What was he to do? He took up the letter in his mouth and began trundling off to find Miss Thompson's cottage in Tittenhanger Lane. But he took such a long time to get there, partly because toads can only move very slowly, and partly because he could not ask anybody the way, that we shall have to go back and see what happened at the castle while he was on his way. That stable boy was a very lazy fellow. When he had finished talking to the prince, he had got back to the stables. Oh dear, he said to himself, I suppose there's nothing to do now but work. And he saw the long morning stretching out ahead of him, with nothing but gloomy grooming, till he had groomed the whole double row of horses that stood there with their heads to the wall and their tails hanging down behind. He picked up a curry comb and began slowly cleaning a brush. He said, to make it sound as though he were working dreadfully hard. And then he dropped the curry comb, yawned, and as he yawned, happened to look up into the stable roof. There he saw the trap door that led up to the loft above the stables. I'll go get some more hay down, he said, meaning to have a quiet nap up there among the sweet-smelling hay. So he fetched a ladder and climbed up through the trap door into the hay loft, and he was just going to throw himself down on a pile of hay when he saw something gleaming in the far corner of the dark loft. It was half covered by a stack of dirty, used-up straw, and he couldn't think what it was, so he yanked with his great hobnailed boots across the loft and pulled at the bright thing till it came clear of the straw that covered it. He had never seen anything like before it. First he turned it over and over in his hand, and then he wiped it clean on his red handkerchief with white spots, saying that he did so. "S" through his teeth, just as though he were grooming a horse. And then at last, when he had wiped the mouthpiece, he put it to his mouth and blew through it. Rooty tootity 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 too. Toot tootity 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 too. And with the very first sound of the trumpet, another sound, a sound that had been going on in the stables all this time, suddenly ceased. This was the noise of the horses, for they had stopped chumping hay and stamping and shambling with their feet, and all of them were standing stock stone, still in rows, like marble horses. And their tails hung down behind them, straighter than ever. And at the very first note of the trumpet, for it was heard in the castle too, all the porters and doorkeepers, and sweepers and cooks and bakers and pastry makers in Mountaineer Castle stopped carrying and doorkeeping and sweeping and cooking and baking and pastry making, and looked at each other and listened. And at the very first sound of the trumpet, King Courtesy, lolling in his study, half asleep, half awake, dreaming of nothing on a sofa, started bolt upright and cried out with a loud voice, "Violet, Violet!" And at the very first sound of the trumpet, Anne Gamboy drew in her scraggy neck from the window and sat down upon her bed and began to be so unhappy, dreaming of the time when she was a little girl called Gambetta, with a sister called Violetta. But Princess Lily, alone up there in her tower, also heard the silver trumpet, and she had never heard it before. And she wondered why she was mewed up here when other princesses walked about the world beneath the open sky. And she wondered what would happen to her as she grew old, and if she could spend all the rest of her life in that one little room in the tower, and what the world was like. Rooty-too, rooty-too, rooty-too. But as the last note died slowly away, everybody in the castle stirred slowly, like a man waking from sleep, and looked mazedly around him. Many of them opened their mouth to ask what had happened, but just as they were about to speak, they seemed to change their minds. They looked away. They dropped their eyes to the ground, as though they were ashamed of something, as though they all knew something which they were all pretending they didn't know. And, as the last note died slowly away, Princess Lily looked up and said, "What was that noise?" And she sounded a little bell for her maiden-waiting to come. And when she came, scolded her for allowing vagrant musicians to play within earshot of the tower, and it was against all orders. And then she began to dab her forehead with cold water and ordered a dish of tea. And as the last note died slowly away, Anne Gamboy frowned and said, "Tut," and getting up from her bed, craned out of a window to catch a last glimpse of the toad that had once been poor Prince Perio, lolloping awkwardly away over the lawn to the castle gates. And as the last note died slowly away, the light left King Courtesy's face, and he sank back on the sofa with only a vague, troubled look in his eyes. But as the last note died slowly away, the stable boy was so pleased with the sound the trumpet made that he put it to his lips and blew again. Once more the sound floated out of the stable, across, and in at the windows of the castle. Once more Princess Lily began to wonder, and then suddenly she knew that she was very unhappy. "I must help myself," she cried, and before the sound had died away, had rung her little bell once more and told the maid-in-waiting, who came to answer it, "Send a messenger at once to Miss Thompson, B Cottage, Tittenhanger Lane, and ask her to come and see me." And once more Anne Gamboy sat a-dreaming, and then, if you had been there, you would have seen a queer change come over her face. The corners of her mouth began to turn up, the wrinkles to leave her forehead, and her eyes to lose their look of cunning. It seemed for a moment as though she were turning into another person. But then, as the sound ceased, her face slipped back, and she became old Gamboy again. And some say that this time Violet herself, deep down in her grave, heard the silver trumpet, and that she stirred and trembled there, and that her face too began to change, taking new wrinkles to its white brow, and that a look of cunning began to creep into her eyes underneath her coverlet of darkness. But when King Courtesy heard the trumpet for the second time, he started up, ran to the door of his study, and called out in a voice that was itself like a trumpet, "Who is doing that? Who is doing that? Send him to me." For the trumpet reminded him too keenly of his beloved, and made him sadder than he could bear. So they found the stable boy and brought him to the king, and the king threatened to execute the stable boy, but forgave him when he heard that he had found the trumpet by accident and did not know who it belonged to. And then Courtesy took the silver trumpet from him, locked it up in a cupboard in his study, and pronounced the death penalty on any man who should put it to his lips again. After he had done that, he sank back again upon the couch and buried his face in his hands. But the stable boy went down the hill into the town and told the citizens all that had happened. And now the citizens were getting very tired of Gamboy's arrogance, for she was a hard queen. And when they heard the stable boy's story of the silver trumpet and of its strange effect upon their king, they smelled a rat. They did. "She has deceived us," they said, remembering the time of the famine. "Why should she not be cheating the king and our poor princess? Why are they both so wretched?" Therefore, they determined to march up to the castle once more to demand an audience of their king. And it would be ill, they said, for Queen Gamboy if they found aught amiss. This they determined to do on the following day, but one, for the next day was Sunday. Well, things kind of speed up here. Going to unravel real quick. So, what do you think about this strange episode about when the trumpet sounded the second time? First of all, the queer change came over Gamboy's face. It began kind of to smooth out and become a different person. But then Violet, who was dead, there was a change coming to her face as well. She was gaining more wrinkles. But then it all stopped and went back to the way it was.
Are they like somehow connected since they're
Yeah,
twins?
yeah. There's a spell that Miss Thompson laid on them that while one lives, the other lives too, something like that at the beginning. And so yeah, I'm not gonna spill the beans yet, but something's brewing. And it's gonna be philosophical, very philosophical.
Well, the spell gets temporarily broken by the trumpet, the beauty of the music, but like beauty's fleeting, it can't hold them. It can make them remember vaguely, but they can't be changed yet. I mean, music does that. Sometimes it just brings every piece together in a moment of harmony and of thought and life events. And then it goes and you want to grab it, but you can't because it wasn't physical in the first place. But it does help you, it lifts you.
Yeah. Now, when I read that, I was reminded. I really like to go back and sometimes rewatch some of the old movies I watched as a child, even children's movies. And there was one particular movie. It was like a musical, And I didn't think that the music would move me so much. But there was a particular tune when I heard that, it kind of whisked me out of myself and back into the childhood days.
Yeah.
And the way that Barfield describes the effect, what on everybody pretty much, that um, they kind of realize that there's something, they're living a false reality. There's something wrong, but they're too ashamed to admit it. But the call is so irresistible.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's particular, I mean, not every music has this charm for me, but there's particular type of music that has this charm for me. And and it can be not just music, not music. It can be like a line of poetry. It can be like hearing another uh language, different language, spoken in some way. Anything really, any sort of sound can have this effect on me. And and at the same time, I also thought of C.S. Lewis's um, essay, what's it called, the Weight of Glory, where he talks about this scent of a flower
Yeah.
that we never really smelled, and it's basically what beauty does to us. When we smell that, we immediately realize that we are in the wrong world. We
Yeah.
have not been made for this.
Yeah.
And this happens, who knows why and how it happens. But he kind of weaves this elaborate argument from desire, showing that that's pretty much a proof that it shouldn't, if we were created for this world, it shouldn't have happened, but it does.
Yeah, I love that part of Lewis, and he repeats it a few times in different places, but that and it really was important to me to hear his explanation of desire as being proof of the other world, being evidence of things to come that you can't touch in this lifetime, but you get these, it's like a smell that reminds you of summer in childhood, or music, and the sense stuff through the senses. Uh, it, and maybe I love that you responded that way to poetry. Um, that words can have that effect, that spell effect, but it's so un in our world that stuff is just put away as we're so focused on the other, the machine world, and then the other is just catch as catch can. You have to find it for yourself. Um,
I liked how, when you were just hearing the machines, like the trucks going by,
yeah,
you almost like transformed it into poetry because at first it was just like driving you crazy, which we've
yeah,
probably all experienced that. But you started naming the trucks, and right there you're by naming things, you're using
yeah,
language to create meaning, and you're
yeah,
transforming something that was inhuman into something that was poetic and meaningful to you. And then you started realizing the purpose of the trucks, and it's almost like you took love and that love transformed, something that was alien.
yeah, yeah. And I'm getting a little more hopeful about um, AI in general, because I think I said why before, because these were physical reality. But I'm finding when I ask questions, and I can ask pretty deep questions, I get pretty eloquent answers. And I think that if we really see it as a tool to advance ourselves in our knowledge, and then be led to other things to read, but never give up, reading a book or anything. Don't give anything up, but just help organize some of our knowledge from our own personal scattershot way of looking at the world. I mean, that's hopeful to me. And we'll see. I mean, everyone's waiting for it to fully take over, but I think it pretty much is happening now.
Hmm.
That it's almost nothing I can ask the computer, when I'm doing research, that it's not right there right
Uh-huh.
now, uh, organized and visibly and delivered instantly.
Hmm.
Not see that, not be so afraid of that.
Yeah. Well, I keep exploring AI. and keep thinking about it. And I really like to hear what other people say about their experience with it. And mm, and I like what you said that basically uh, how would I put this? Like, for instance, I mean, we have this conversation. I mean, we are real people. We talk. It would have been different if we met in person, because it would be a different. I understand that even the energy would be different. And but this is good. I mean, technology allows us to do this. So
Amazing, yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah. And as Jill said, we can fill this space with art and poetry and our own music and this energy of God, basically. And there's hope in that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I see the dark side of it though, in that often I put this. I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. Mm, like for example, when I'm writing an article, I'm doing it myself, right? But when I see how AI is being promoted, it's like let AI do the job so you can kind of take like rest, like let AI do this and that, so that you can sort of like uh, delegate all the toil and drudgery
Mhm.
to it. And this is like a very, like thin ice to me, because I like sitting and thinking about words when I write, and
Mhm.
sometimes it feels like you're giving birth, sort of like travail, so to say, because you have to kind of mm, basically it's like fine tuning yourself to the voice of the spirit, you know.
Exactly. And
Right.
your essays could never be AI to me. I mean, I would never mistake them for AI because they're original, spontaneous in terms of a new thought, of two thoughts put together. See, that's where I think we're protected. I don't think you could be duplicated
Hmm.
in your work. And I think we'll be able to sniff it out,
I
when
guess
we see,
so.
yeah, just when you look at almost the pristine perfection of an AI analysis of something, it's not humanized. Now, maybe that'll change. But I think those of us who still want original poetry and thought and looking at the world, I think we can tell. I
Hmm.
think we'll be able to tell.
Yeah, I really hope that we're not gonna be
Yeah.
like Prince Courtesy, King Courtesy, not knowing the difference. Because they look
Right.
alike. They look alike, so
Yeah,
calling
exactly.
one the
That,
other.
that that's a good insight. And I do think that like I write in my journal every morning and I just write to like fine tune and clarify my thinking.
Mhm.
And when AI first came out, I had to try the chat bot. And so I was like having a conversation with AI about like a dream I had. But it gave me insights that were interesting, but afterwards I decided not to do it anymore because I felt like it's the process of conversing with my own self and with, journal writing as a process of meditation and prayer as well. I feel like that is what creates something within me
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
definitely.
can like play the music.
Mhm.
And if I just had AI figure out everything for me that was going on in my life, and I was using AI as an oracle, like, oh my God, my day looks crazy. Tell me what to prioritize. Instead of me doing that,
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm starting to turn AI into the voice of God, and it is not that. It's not. And I just hope we don't start confusing AI with the voice of God or with
Hmm.
our own voice. We're
Well,
way wiser than AI in the end.
I
I think.
think that's most scary thinking about kids who are growing up, um, not even been born yet, but ones who I have some little ones in the family, and knowing that they will always know a world with AI. And that, and we're talking having known another world that we can hold on to, but you wonder how it's going to be 20 years from now, the children who are being born now and
Mhm.
Well,
and
Right.
forgetting
I
it
certainly
pretty
see the,
quickly.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I certainly see the tendency in my kids. My youngest is 17, that he is delegating more and more to it, even in school, even like ever in everything.
Mhm.
And then this, it alarms me that yes, like you said, they don't seem to know and appreciate and value the other world
Yeah.
and how real embodied things are and look like, you know.
Well, what struggle is too, what it
Well, yeah, yeah.
struggle to write the best sentence you can.
Mhm.
That struggle is, as you were saying, Jill, is part of your humanity discovering something, but
It's
they
what
may not
transforms
value.
you. Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it does. I believe that.
And the passing on things from generation to generation. Like my son has this amazing opportunity because his grandparents, live within, well, two of them live within walking distance, and he's out every summer helping them in the garden and that sort of
Wow.
thing. And I just feel like, I don't know, I look at my parents and I'm like, I see all of their wisdom and their skills and their knowledge, and I'm like, oh, I want my son
Oh,
to
that's
have
great.
that.
Yeah,
And it's just not something that you don't get that experience and that fellowship with AI.
right, right. Yeah.
Right.
Oh man. Yeah,
Yeah.
what would Barfield think? Can you imagine? What
Well,
Barfield would think,
yeah,
or
yeah,
Lewis, or any of those guys.
yeah. Well, Lewis was interesting, and Tolkien was interesting that way. When cars were like appearing, like
Yeah.
in the beginning of the 20th century. I mean, they both were like against. It's like, I think Lewis wrote on several occasions that uh, we seem to not realize what we're losing when we're going too fast in a car, because
Oh
there's a
yeah.
whole world that you were missing
Mhm.
that could have enriched you. And I'm like thinking, okay, we're in the 21st centuries, and we can't imagine life without cars. But my goodness, how much of the world we have missed, already. Even though we think we are gaining, and we are gaining, a lot of world. And I love driving long distance. But then I think the good balance for me is to sometimes not use the car, use, bikes, and then when we get to places, walk as much as possible. Uh, Even 10 miles is great,
Wow.
and just, to go back to that, because
Yeah.
you can't have one without the other. Yeah.
Yeah. So things are changing so fast. But I'm also shocked at how adaptive the human being is. It's shocking when you look back over how we adapted to everything and then move on and move on and move on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm hopeful, maybe it's in a different way, but I'm hopeful. I've heard this phrase, new renaissance, from several people recently. And I think it's a good way to describe it because one thing, for example, we've all had, our share of like fast food. And we know that it was really, really popular for as long as I can remember myself. And you guys in the US, you had it for, I don't know for how long. In Russia, it just came maybe in the late 80s, the whole concept of fast food, but everything was prepared really from scratch. But then nowadays, as you look into this whole area of alternative medicine, of holistic eating, I mean, people finally realize that fast food is not really that good in terms of nutrition and even in terms of like how spiritual. I mean, it's one thing you get a package of French fries at a restaurant, and another thing that you actually cut up the potato and cook it. I like my grandma's recipes of how she cooked it when I was little, and so I do it her way, and it kind of is a ritual for me. So it enhances the whole thing, and the taste, of course, is different. I mean, it doesn't compare. But so I'm thinking if I can kind of expand this analogy to AI, so what we're going to probably discover already, I see people discovering that already, that we start valuing purely human things, like real things that we can touch and see, and it has a different um, feel, and it really is a different thing, for
Well,
us.
like live music or theater, where we actually know those are real bodies.
Yes, 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 yes.
I would hope for that to come back and appeal to people again,
Yeah,
like it used to, just have people get out and experience, in your town, a concert or something where
yeah.
reality is functioning.
Hmm. And kind of goes back to this whole conversation about appearances and something Jill was talking about, that basically is like, I mean, what's the difference between synthetic food and real food? One has grown out of the ground, and another one was assembled from pieces.
Yeah,
One has been, I mean, synthetic food, it's been proven again and again that it ruins you, long term. It just ruins your body.
Mhm.
And more, I mean, whole idea of Whole Foods, I like going to this store, Whole Foods, and just buying the whole idea has been like so popular nowadays, and people pay so much more for a pack of for a dozen eggs, just because they're like cage free or whatever, pasture raised, and we
yeah,
we understand that and we start valuing that more and more because it's real. I
yeah,
mean, and we see the difference in how we feel, and the bodies react differently and things like that. So
yeah,
I'm hopeful that that same thing is going to happen in the humanities,
yeah, I
meaning
hope
like,
so.
yeah,
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
so thank you guys. Been a while.
Well, thank you. It's
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Yeah,
Yes,
And
thank you very much.
we have a new date. I'm going to write it down again. It's
yes,
the 13th of June.
13th, yes.
Okay.
And I'm gonna send the link probably
Okay.
tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Thanks.
So thank you, and
Bye
have a
bye,
good
everybody.
week.
Thank
You
you. You
too.
Thank
too.
you
Bye.
very
Bye bye.
much.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.